Happy Monday. Good morning. We have a fun show for you today on the BWI Live Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. That is Sean Fitz. But that's a foregone conclusion. We always have a great time here on the show today. What we actually have is we're going to be resetting the class of 2024, 13 commitments. So if Penn State gets a class of 25, 26, we are halfway through that number. Also, Garrett Sexton, one of those players that committed to Penn State, he and I had a conversation this weekend. You're going to see part of that as an exclusive sneak preview of the interview, which you'll be able to check out at bluewhiteillustrated.com later today. That is going to be some On3 exclusive content, so you need to subscribe to bluewhiteillustrated.com if you want to get some of the full 20-minute conversation. But Fitz, we have breaking news here to start the show. The Philadelphia Eagles have selected another Georgia Bulldog for their defense on Monday.
Yeah, don't throw the breaking news there at me because that just made me skip a beat there, especially when I cover recruiting, because it's always the funny ones where you pop up. Like the other day, I was waiting for Corey Smith, and somebody liked or retweeted a Franklin We Are Better tweet from earlier in the week. And I'm like, Don't do that. Don't do that at all, because that makes me just, my heart's not built for that. So, the little things like that. So saying there's breaking news and then turning it into Philadelphia Eagles draft talk, I'm not on board with you for that one. But they did just keep taking guys, and I'm like, how is he still there? And how is Howie getting away with all this stuff? And me as a Washington fan, I sit back and it's irrelevant to me. And the draft's usually my best day of the year, peak Washington Commanders season. But just to see them just keep exceeding expectations and the Eagles doing good thing, it's just crazy. So anyway, do you have any more I know you have last minute draft thoughts, like the way that you've covered that and followed that. I know you have some thoughts. So anything that you've got as we start the show today?
I like coming back to the Commanders. I really like having Mitchell Tinsley in that organization. I think he can provide a little bit of juice. I really think he should play in the slot, which then is interesting with Jahan. I think Jahan can win outside, so you've got some versatility there. He can provide a little bit of depth, and he's one guy that I think might be a better pro than he was a college player if he finds the right situation, because he is a big-bodied guy that has really great short area quickness, and I'm excited to see what he can do in the NFL. And then just still surprised that Sean Clifford went in the 5th round. Not surprised that he went to the Packers. I know there's a pre-draft buzz. He met with them a couple times, but the 5th round, as so many quarterbacks were going in this draft, and the guys that were in the 7th round started going in the 5th, and then I hear like this Brock Purdy sort of boomerang effect of pushing up all the quarterbacks just in case you find one that can get you through. I thought that was super interesting, and I think it's a good fit, for Sean Clifford. I wrote in detail why over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Those are really the two main things that I come out of the weekend with. And then the Bills, they were okay. You got the best tight end and the best guard, which is like getting the best side dishes, but at the same time, they needed those positions. So it was a good draft. It was pretty low key, I think.
I didn't really like the tight end pick for Buffalo, because I'm a big Dawson Knox first touchdown scorer prop better. So that one's going to hurt there. I was when the Houston quarterback came off the board, I think in the 4th round, I was like, something's crazy, because I looked at saw Aiden O'Connell come off the board in the 4th round. Those guys don't scream 4th round picks to me, but then again, quarterback is so thin. I actually opened the draft board, like the draft tracker, and there were fewer quarterbacks on there than I thought. And the thought creeped into my mind is like, does this push Clifford into the draft? Like, does this get him there? And then 5th round, I think everybody was taken by surprise. Also, it's okay to be happy for that. I'm very happy for Sean Clifford. We've criticized him. We've criticized, we've praised, we've done all that kind of stuff in the Sean Clifford experience, but for him to go get drafted, I think is awesome. I think it's absolutely awesome. And the way that he finished his career, it's great legacy and everything like that. So that's really cool. But yeah, I'm not going to lie. 5th round, did not see that one coming.
Yeah. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that, it's our job to kind of tell you how it is when it comes to Penn State players and not necessarily sugarcoat things. We try to be as respectful as possible, but when you see Sean Clifford and the emotion that came to him when he was drafted, Fitz, I know you retweeted this if you check it out online on social media. That's what it's about, man. We talk all the time about how hard it is to be a football player and how much effort it takes, and you could see on a lot of these guys, how much they care and how much Sean Clifford cares about playing football, and then to be drafted and to overcome all those expectations. You could see all of that in that 30-second clip or whatever it was from social media. So super happy for him, super happy for that situation. And the door isn't closed to him seeing playing time. I mean, nobody knows what Jordan Love is. Right. I know he's going to be the starter, but it's not like he's going to be behind Patrick Mahomes in the NFL. He's not going to be behind a guy that's a clearly established starter with a big contract. This is a guy going into his fourth year in the NFL with no playing experience.
Well, it's like when Washington drafted RG3, they took Kirk Cousins later in the draft. And I said to myself before they draft, like that draft day, I'm like, someone's going to take Kirk Cousins and he's going to be in the league for 10 years. Now he's exceeding those kind of expectations, but that's kind of how you feel about Sean, is like, if he holds a clipboard for 7 years, that's fantastic. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the expectations are. And obviously Jordan Love taking over for, big shoes and Aaron Rodgers, but like, that's really cool to have that opportunity because he's smart enough to do it. Like that's something that we keep going back to, is those pre-call checks and things like that at the line of scrimmage, like putting people in the right areas. Like you can hang around the league knowing that stuff and being a reliable backup and hitching yourself to a coach who might move around. How Colt McCoy's been in the league forever. Chase Daniel's in the league forever. Like those guys is, if that's the goal, that's fantastic. I agree. It's a good fit. It's a good opportunity for him to carve out and be a veteran. I think, is he older than Jordan Love? Did I read that? Or was that
3.5 months? Yeah, that was the first thing I looked up because I was like, Jordan Love is not that old. I know he came in young, and Clifford was in college for 6 years, so they're both 98 babies. And Clifford was born in July instead of November.
It's nice of the Packers to draft a mentor for their third-year quarterback. So that's fantastic work by them. But no, really cool. No real surprises. Tinsley's interesting because you brought him in as an extremely productive guy from Western Kentucky, a guy that got some draft buzz, and all of a sudden he doesn't get drafted. Will that sting Penn State in the long run in terms of recruiting receivers out of the portal? Maybe. I mean, that's something that other teams will point to and say a guy was very productive at a lower level, went up, did not do what he needed to do, or I don't want to say did not do what he needed to do, but did not produce the way that, you would think that he would produce, given the numbers.
To get to the NFL. Yeah, I think it's fair to say, like, for that threshold, he was good for Penn State, but to get the NFL notice, that clearly didn't happen.
Yeah, to bring in a transfer and then have him go undrafted is kind of a mark against you. So I'll be interested to see how that works its way out. And it's not a position like with Derek Tangelo, you could point to, hey, he started pretty much every game. He played all the time. He did some good things in camp. But he's also a defensive tackle. So I don't think it matters as much because it's different when how many receivers were drafted in this draft. I mean, that's going to be something that's a check mark against Penn State, but they also have an opportunity to turn it around with Dante Cephas coming in, Malik McClain, all those guys. So be very interested to see how that sort of narrative builds itself over the next couple of years.
The last guy I want to talk about, and not to end on a sour note, but I was looking at, I didn't write anything about Parker Washington because I'm a little concerned. I don't think this is a great fit for him because you look at what they have on the roster in Jacksonville. Zay Jones is an inside-outside slot receiver guy, big-bodied. Christian Kirk can line up in the slot, and they traded for Calvin Ridley. So I don't really know where Parker fits into this. Are they actually going to ask him to be a slash player, like take snaps at running back, and how does he fit into that wide receiver core? I think going to play with Trevor Lawrence is great, but I'm a little concerned about Parker going in the 5th round and being a guy immediately 4th or 5th on the depth chart without a lot of upward mobility, from what it seems at least.
Yeah, I'm curious about that one, but also like I think Parker Washington's very good. Like he hurt himself at the end of the season in practice and was unable to run. Like it wasn't a situation where he was refusing to run. He's not healthy. He was not healthy enough to run. You saw enough tape. You saw him, what he did against Ohio State. So he did it against good teams. Ohio State secondary being what it was with their tackling issues and everything doesn't really matter because he did it against Ohio State. Mm-hmm. I think he's a really good player. I think he's a steal, but I agree. I mean, the fit, given what's there, ahead of him, it's going to be tough for him to break through. Now, I think he will. I think he'll be fine in terms of making a roster because he is that talented and he's more athletic than I think people want to give him credit for just because he didn't go with the combine because he wasn't able to go with the combine. So we'll see what happens. I think he'll catch on. He was already a pro by the time he got to Penn State. So like he has that mentality. So I think that's going to help him out as well.
Before we get to our next topic today, I'm loving, by the way, post-draft conversation. Post-draft Monday is the best, but we got to
threw you a
let you.
bone here. So that was we don't have Ryan Snyder today. He had a good weekend, so he's off today. So we decided to open it up a little bit, talk a little draft.
Yeah, the problem is now Wednesday, I'm going to have to repeat some of the things I said here on this show, but that's okay. We have plenty of time to come up with more interesting.
It's the internet. You can repeat it all you want, and it's still new to somebody. So.
Yeah, which is why we're going to talk about Corey Smith in just a hot second. But before that, are you ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream? Are you looking for a side hustle working your current job? As somebody who's had 4 side hustles in his life, finding one that provides you actual value and money, that's really important. Or do you want to diversify, build wealth, and leave a legacy? Check out My Perfect Franchise. Andy Ludicky, I met Andy, by the way, so I can attest to this is a guy who really cares about his clients. I drilled him on a lot of stuff because this is an area in business I don't know a lot about, but I know to be suspicious of people. And Andy is a guy that, from what I can tell in my interactions with him, a guy I would trust. Find My Perfect Franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. He is a franchise consultant with extensive experience placing people like you in the perfect franchise to manage. He'll go over a bunch of stuff, including your financial situation, your background, your expertise, your passions, what you want to accomplish, and so much more. It's an in-depth process that takes a couple of months that will get you ready for the next step in your life. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions, because I don't know everything about franchise consultation or franchise management or business. He does. So go talk to him. Check out Blue White Illustrated message board. You can go to Lions Den message forum or at Andy at myperfectfranchise.net to get started today. And if you see here on the screen, 404-973-9901 is his phone number. So check out My Perfect Franchise. The last thing, you and I talked about this on Friday, so we'll just do a quick recap here. Corey Smith committed to the Nittany Lions on Friday. He is a consensus 4-star running back, and the second running back in the class here. So Fitz, an overall recap of Corey Smith, how he fits with the Nittany Lions, and how you feel he, his skills translate to Penn State.
Yeah, does a lot of things very well. Kind of a slash guy, catches the ball very well. We talked about him being a receiver down the field, about 5'11", and 175 right now. Good speed, 11.1, can get faster. And I think I don't think he's run the 100 meters this year, so we don't have a frame of reference on that in this spring, but we had that 11.1 from last year. So good pickup for Penn State. I think he's very shifty, a lot like London Montgomery. Made that comparison last week, and I'm excited to see them continue to build in Wisconsin. It's been defying all of logic for Penn State to go and get 3 guys out of Wisconsin, 3 pretty good guys out of Wisconsin. So be interesting to continue to work on that. Actually wrote up some stuff over the weekend explaining how that all came together. So check that out on the site when it goes live. But very, very good pickup for Penn State. Now 2 running backs in the class, Quentin Martin and Corey Smith, different style of running backs. I think Penn State will still continue to recruit other running backs because you can't have enough running backs. I think Ohio State just took a 3rd one this weekend in Jordan Lyle, who was Penn State's top target, or one of Penn State's top targets at running back. So you can never have enough running backs, as we saw at the end of last season, as 2 freshmen were carrying the load for Penn State. So Smith, a good pickup for Penn State. Industry has him as a 4-star. I believe On3 has him as a 3-star. Size is something that kind of works against him. Speed is good, can get faster. So yeah, a lot to like there in Corey Smith, the newest Nittany line.
If you want to check out the full conversation we had about Corey, bluewhiteillustrated.com, or here on Blue White Illustrated on YouTube, the Corey Smith breaking news video, which is one of our latest in the breaking news commitments. There's been quite a few recently, so check them all out, by the way. And coming up in just a little bit, more on Wisconsin and the Wisconsin recruits. We do have a question here in the chat that's a great question here from Stephen Light. Is there a date that names in the transfer portal expire, or does it all just go out with a whimper? He says, great show as always. Stephen, thank you for being here and contributing as always. If you want to leave a tip in the tip jar like Stephen with the super chat, by all means, we appreciate that, but we'll be talking to you throughout the show. So how does the transfer portal work? I think he's saying, do you expire in the portal? I feel like you just got to make a decision at a certain point, right?
Yeah, you had to make a decision by yesterday. So what this does is, so when you go to the port, or when you decide you want to transfer, you have to go to your compliance people. You have to put in the appropriate information. They process it. So like guys might still pop up in the portal today, maybe even tomorrow. Sometimes it takes 2 business days to get in there, or 2 days to get in there, depending on how on top of it your compliance is. So you might still see a couple names trickle out of there. But when you're in the portal, like you're out there, you're able to talk to coaches, you're able to take visits and things like that. So like it's open for these guys. The window slamming shut is not, it's not like the transfer window in European soccer where you have to get the deal done by 4 o'clock or else you're not changing teams. This is a situation where you can get in the portal and then you can take visits in the spring, you can take visits in the summer. Obviously, if you want to get there as soon as possible, if you're a player or if you're a team that's trying to fill a void, but everybody that's in there right now still has an opportunity to go to another school. So we will see what happens with the guys that they've been in contact with. I think this second window, not great. Like this is kind of what we expected. It's going to be a bunch of backups that went through spring, and then maybe some surprises. I know Keon Coleman went into the portal last night from Michigan State. Be interesting to watch. I don't think Penn State's really like a destination. It sounds like he's from Louisiana. He's so down south makes sense. But that was an interesting one because he's a starter for Michigan State. I know Peyton Thorne, the starting quarterback for Michigan State, although whether he was going to start next year or not, I don't know. But he's in the portal. So you had some surprises going at the last minute. But at the same time, it was kind of a trickle compared to the winter period in the portal, which makes sense. I mean, that's only logical. So it's going to be interesting to track to see where it goes. I will say, going back to my first point, in terms of being in the portal, having contact, Dante Cephas is still in the portal. But because he's in the portal, he's able to keep open contact with other schools, Penn State, namely here. So that's the interesting thing there is like get your name in the portal so you have the ability to go out and check out other schools. Or if you want to return to your own school and you've talked to your coaches and they haven't cut off your financial aid or what have you, then you'll be able to make that work. So it's not a be all end all last night at midnight or whatever. You can still kind of work. And also grad transfers can go in whenever. Like this is not a situation when, where like it might be May 25th or something like that. And you see a name pop up in the portal. That's why they're a grad transfer. So I think Trey Potts was a grad transfer and popped up mid spring. So that's kind of what we're looking at with how things work with grad transfers.
It's a lot to keep track of. There's a lot of different rules, and one thing I'll say is a good indication that a guy isn't welcome back is if he doesn't have a player profile page anymore. A couple times I've looked over at sites.
Zapped so quick. Oh my gosh, I made that. I had that observation this weekend. I went to look for a guy, and it's just like because it comes up on Google, like the player's name comes up on Google. It's like 404 not found. It's like, oh, you ain't coming back there, guy. So funny stuff how these SIDs are all of a sudden on it. I guess that comes from the coaches though.
I imagine it's a couple of guys. They don't have the most graceful of exits. Ryan says, "What's up, guys?" And Emir says, "Great show. Thanks. Appreciate all you guys in the chat. We'll be talking to you. There's a couple questions here when we get to our next segment that I want to get to. But let's first set it up. As we said at the top of the show, Penn State is halfway through their class, so it's time for a roster reset. This is going to be looking at kind of a general overview, not necessarily position by position, although I will be pointing out areas of strength and places that the class is still working on, and we'll be getting through all those details, but we're not going to hit on every single position. Some of your questions in the chat are valid in those areas, but let's take a look at the class strength so far. When we look at the class of 2024, here are the positions that the Nittany Lions have done a lot of work at so far, and a lot of these positions you'll understand. Cornerback, offensive line make up the majority of the class, running back, and then linebacker is the question here that I have for you, Fitz. Would you say this is a class strength? Because there's two players, but they're basically the same, like they're at the same position at kind of both are Mikes. So is this a class strength, or do you think there's still more to work on at linebacker with more names that we're going to see and maybe even doubling up what they have now?
I think the question mark is appropriate there. You want to get some more athletes, probably a Sam type. Waller from Mississippi is a guy that is really good. Penn State has done a really nice job recruiting him so far. Elijah Newby is also one to, I would say, keep an eye on as a guy that's rising up the board for a lot of schools. He's running track now, and he's doing things that he should not be doing at his size, 6'3", 200 plus, running sub 11 seconds. So I think there's a lot to like there in terms of newbie. So I think they're going to try and get more athletic at linebacker. As you mentioned, two Mikes for the most part, two box guys at the very least, but two Mikes in Anthony Specca and Kari Jackson. So I think that is an area that is fairly strong right now, but I think it has a lot of room to get better. And I think they're going to continue to do that, continue to get more athletic, add those guys with length, with pop on the outside, and recruit that outside position.
I'm interested in that because there's a lot of good linebackers left on the board, and there's a lot of good athletes left on the board at that position. So what they have now, I think, is a great base to work from, and then adding and filling out that class is going to be the interesting thing, and how many choices they have to make there. Because I mean, Willard, I apologize for his name. I'm blanking on his name, from the same place as the tight end where Penn State went up to New England. We just talked about him last show.
Newbie.
Newbie. Newbie is this awesome looking prospect. Waller is another guy that people are very, very high on. We get asked about a lot, including here by Michael. He says, are guys like Ernest Willer and Jamonte Waller primed for an on-3 100 bump? And if both guys commit, here's the question that's always behind the question is, this is top 10 class. So let's start with just, the player evaluation. Do you think both those guys could see an increase in where they are in the on 300?
I think they can. I think more so Waller, just because if you look at him as an edge prospect, he's only a hair over 6 foot. Like, he's short for an edge prospect. And I think that's going to be what holds him back in terms of like ultimate ranking. Although I do think 24/7 has him as 5-star. Like, his kid is really, really darn good. He fits as he fits as a will for Penn State, and I love him at that fit. Like, he's a guy that can attack, guy can come off the edge if he needs to, can blitz from the second level, just do some really, really good things all over the field, and he's a fit. And again, size is going to be something where it might hurt him at some schools that you get him on campus and you think maybe this guy's supposed to be 6'2", this guy's supposed to be 6'3", whatever. He's not. So I think that helps Penn State, to be honest with you, because they've seen him, they like him, they've committed to recruiting him as a top target, and they've done as such. So I think they've done a really nice job recruiting him. I think he should be a 4-star guy. I know On3 has him as a 3-star, at least the last time I checked, which was seemed low to me. But I'm not the one doing those evaluations. I think Waller's a heck of a player. He's fun. I mean, he's just put on a tape. He's fun to watch.
He is, and I'll show you here. The players we're talking about that are part of the committed class. Waller, that tweener thing, I think, is just like, because talking to Charles, and one of the things he talks about is ranking these guys like it's the NFL draft. So those measurables are really important, and guys that are tweeners tend to fall through the cracks. So a guy like Waller, that maybe he's an edge, maybe he's a linebacker, he probably isn't going to rank the same way as somebody who has 34-inch arms and is 6'5" and has a clear defined position. A couple of other guys that don't have a clear defined position that I want to talk about here as a segue into the offensive line. Caleb Brewer, listed as an athlete, as a 3-star. Really good athlete. Some of the things on his tape, in terms of rawness and position fit, I think are part of the reason he is a 3-star. I think it's accurate for him because of all of those kind of mysteries about him. But when we talk about the offensive line, we're going to talk about Egan Boyer and Garrett Sexton later in the show. But Brewer, how does he fit into this picture with a really strong class overall?
Yeah, I think he is an offensive lineman in terms of like what he brings to the table from his tool set. But I think he's got the ability to play on the defensive line, play a defensive tackle. I'll be really interested to see which direction his body goes. He's cutting weight to be a 285-pound wrestler right now. He's a very good wrestler. Also wrestled, I think, with a broken wrist that he just got fixed up in this offseason. So like, there's a lot to like in terms of what he brings to the table. He's out there running routes at 280 pounds. He's physical. Yeah. He's aggressive. Ross Tucker loves this kid, just absolutely loves this kid. And I got a text from Ross a couple of weeks ago. I hadn't talked to Ross in a while, and it was a 3-page text or whatever about how this kid is. He's definitely one to watch. I'll take Ross's opinion. He knows what he's looking at. So be very interested to see Brewer's growth. Is he he might be a 315-pound guard. Like it might be a situation where he just finds his way early in his career and then kind of settles in and is a productive player. But I like a lot of the things that he does, but you can see that he's probably capped by what he doesn't do right now in terms of rankings.
Yeah, arm length is one thing I'm interested with him specifically, but not even just arm length. I always talk about functional length, because if you have 34-inch arms but you don't use them, it doesn't matter. And he doesn't have the longest arms and doesn't really have great hand usage. It shows up especially at defensive tackle, where I see he's got one or two moves, and I don't know that he kind of just pinballs into the offensive line and then goes and makes a play because he's super athletic. So I'm very interested to see how he develops and what skills present themselves. Obviously, cornerback is a great position here. You can see John Mitchell, Kenny Woosley, Antoine Belgrave Shorter. I think we're a little bit higher, and certainly Penn State is a little bit higher on their cornerback class than maybe this picture presents, because again, Penn State's a top 10 class. They got a lot of 3-stars. Some of these guys have a lot of hidden talent, and I think you can see corner is one area you would agree, especially on the outside, right, with these two guys that can play press and bump and run.
Yeah, I agree. Mitchell and Belgrave Shorter can both play on the outside. Belgrave Shorter could be a safety. Mitchell, I'm very, very high on Mitchell. And then you can put Kenny Woosley in the slot, and like he's probably an inside out guy. Like he's a little bit shorter, but he can play. He's quick enough to play in the slot. So I'm fine with corner. If you can land a Jameer Grimsley, like that would be cherry on top type. Daniel Harris, like cherry on top for that class. Because he's very, very good as well. So, it's you can never count on Florida, but Penn State's got a couple of commits in Florida. They're working on some other guys in Florida. So maybe this is the time they get over the hump and get those guys across. I know Grimsley was impressed with his visit when he came up in the spring. He's going to come back in the summer. So that's definitely, if you're looking at how to make a strong group even stronger, Grimsley he's very good.
The offensive line, to circle back to them quickly, because we don't talk about it enough, the godfather of the class, Cooper Cousins. He's been in this class for so long, and to be 6'6", 305, and be a center for Penn State, an interior offensive lineman, how much of an advantage is that for this class to have that flexibility?
I think, well, the flexibility there is at 6'6". I mean, he can play tackle. It wouldn't be a shock to me if next year at spring ball we saw him at tackle, just to get him the skills. It's like when they bring guys in at safety and play him at corner for a year or something like that to learn the coverage skills, to do all that. If you can learn, I know center's a tough position to master, but if you can learn the tackle skills, the kick set, all that kind of stuff that makes you an more all-around lineman. And if he can stick there, like we talked about Birchmeier this spring, potentially sticking there, his value is sky high as an interior lineman. Everybody's value is higher as an offensive tackle, because that position's so much more important. Not so much more important, but so important. So I think that's where you get the value and the flexibility with Cooper Cousins. Yes, he does seem like your center of the future, but also if you can be an offensive tackle, you have that in your arsenal. So, I mean, you're recruiting guys. They're recruiting big guys. Garrett Sexton's over 6'6". Egan Boyer's nearly 6'8". Cooper Cousins is about 6'6". So, like, they're recruiting bigger guys. I know Franklin said that about the defensive line after the Michigan game last year, but it holds true for both sides of the ball. I mean, you look at the last class with Javen Williams, Anthony Dunk is big, Birchmeier is big. They had Malik McNeil, who was huge. So like there was an emphasis on getting bigger. Now you want those guys to be able to move. You want those guys to be able to be tough and block and things like that. So we'll see what happens with that group. But you've got a lot to like in that offensive line group, and they're still on some guys. I don't think they're slowing down on Kevin Haywood, William Satterwhite, Packy Finau's coming in for a visit. So you've got a bunch of guys that are still out there. That net is often cast wide, but I'm not sure that they've caught as much in that net as they have in the 2024 class so far. Yeah. Phil Troutwine's done a really nice job.
He has, especially if you, like you just mentioned, if you consider that Cooper Cousins can be a tackle prospect. I wrote something that we'll talk about here in just a minute. If you consider that, they've got 3, and they might be able to get 4. And I don't know the last time they've been able to do that. And that's a very impressive
and their top
situation.
Guy might be a defensive lineman, so you've got that going too. So yeah.
To round out the strengths here, and we talked about this a little bit with Corey when we talked about Corey Smith and his commitment, but you see him here at the bottom, 5'11", 175, and then we come up to the top, Quentin Martin, seen as an athlete. So you think that there is room for another running back in this class? You think that that's a likelihood, or maybe not a likelihood? It would have to take a special guy to get into this class.
Yeah, I think the last part is what you nailed there. It would take a special guy. I've met Jaywan Sider. Jaywan Sider is like Terry Smith on offense. He wants as many guys as he can get. So, you take Quentin Martin. They took Quentin Martin as a running back. We have him listed as an athlete. They took him as a running back. He's a really good player, really all-around player. Corey Smith, good player, but they're going to keep pushing. They're going to keep pushing for some of the top backs in the country. Like, this is a situation where Penn State has recruited running back really well. Penn State has a brand at running back. They've got Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, who are carrying on that brand of Saquon Barkley, Miles Sanders, etc. And they're going to try and cash in as much as they can. If it means taking a third back, which isn't likely at this point, but if it means taking a third back in this class, you have the ability to do so. Now, maybe that's something that pops up in October, November, something like that. But at the same time, like, they're going to keep up. I mean, Sider keeps up relationships unlike anyone I've ever seen. Like, it's ridiculous. And that goes beyond Florida. There's a lot of guys out there, just in spots you don't think of, Virginia, West Virginia. Like, he keeps up his roots there and his ties in West Virginia. I mean, it's just all over the place. So I think they're going to continue to recruit running backs. I don't know that they're going to be all in your face about it, bringing guys for officials like that in June, but maybe for the whiteout, the guy pops up, something like that could happen. So yeah, it's as Rob said, a nice problem to have. You can be selective at that position. There's some really good players still out there, and there's some really good players out there on the radar that we don't really consider on the radar. Like, number one back in the On3 rankings, name is slipping me right now, wants to visit Penn State. Okay, you're going to let him visit. Like, that's going to be a situation where you have that flexibility, and it's not a situation where you're running guys out and running guys back in. So it's a good position to be in. Sider does a really nice job with that. And, I wouldn't be shocked if he didn't give up on Jordan Lyle. There's guys out there that are just that good. And as I mentioned, Ohio State took a 3 running back class. It can be done. It can be done. Not likely to be done, but it can be done.
Let's move on to the areas of the class that they're still working on. And I think it's interesting to point out that of this group, there are 2 new position coaches who have yet to land a recruit, which I think makes a ton of sense, seeing as one of them was officially hired at the start of camp. But quarterback, wide receiver, defensive line, and safety. Now, safety, obviously, you mentioned Belgrave Shorter could be a part of that conversation, but there are no official commitments at this point, I believe. So how do you feel about where these positions stand right now in terms of they don't have recruits, but you feel confident Penn State's in good position with guys that they are targeting? It's just these are taking a little bit longer.
I think safety is, you look at this group and you feel probably best about it. DeJuan Lane came out with the top 5 this weekend. Penn State's right in it. I know Notre Dame's in it as well. Michigan just offered, they're in it. But this is a recruitment where you have a really good chance. And he may be the top guy there. It's so difficult to look at the safety board because DeJuan Lane could be a Sam. He like a Curtis Jacobs type guy. It's hard to say, but I know he's good. I know he's good, and they want him. So like, that's the guy that I have at the top of the board as a defensive athlete hybrid, whatever you want to call it. But he's a top target. Beyond that, you've got a bunch of guys in New Jersey. Kaj Sanders is out there. Vabu Torre. You've got guys all over the place in terms of safeties that you're going to bring in for visits this summer. So I feel fine with safety as long as Poindexter's there. And I mean, you look at all these positions and which one is like not hype, but which one is the one that is drawing the most praise right now? It's safety. Like, I think that'll be one where it works itself out because of the assembly line that Poindexter's been able to put through over the last couple of years. Hear great things about KJ Winston, hear great things about Zakee Wheatley. Those guys are still young players. So be interesting to see them sort of filter through that and eventually see who comes out on top. I think wide receiver and defensive line are going to move slower. I mean, that's just natural when you bring in new guys to form relationships or sort of renew relationships. So we'll see what happens in the summer there. You would like to have gotten started. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I think you would like to have a defensive lineman on the board right now, whether that be Jalen Harvey, Malachi
Xavier
Williams.
Gilliam would be the one that I was surprised that it hadn't committed yet, given how much we talked about him and how much buzz there was this spring.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. So, but I think that defensive tackle probably a little bit more important if you're splitting between the two. Benedict Ume was on campus for the spring game. That was huge. Nigel Smith's been up a couple times. Xavier Gilliam, I know that Ryan has a pick in for him. There's names out there. There's plenty of names out there, and they're going to filter out and get here on campus this summer. I'm not a panic guy, but you'd like to see one or two guys on board already. Just hasn't happened yet. So be interesting to see, especially with the changeover, the way that it was done, in that you brought in a guy that was already here. How do those relationships carry over? How does he do it with the big coach pants on and go from there? I think Dion will be fine because he's a good recruiter. But we're going to see this summer what those two positions are really made of.
Do you feel this is one thing I've been trying to gauge, and at offensive tackle this spring, I felt very good about the number of players that I felt had quality film and were quality prospects that Penn State was in on at tackle. I feel similarly, maybe not as deep at defensive tackle, watching a lot of the film, seeing a lot of the guys and the names that Penn State seems to have positive relationships with. So you mentioned you're not a panic guy. Is that why? And do you think that that pool is deep enough that if they miss on a couple, they're still quality players that you feel like can come in and be a complete player and not a guy that is he can do one specific thing, more of what they're looking for and they've been unable to get recently?
Yeah, I mean, you're swinging big there. Also, you're recruiting Liam Andrews as a defensive lineman, so that's certainly comes into the mix here. Gives you the opportunity to bring in a really, really good player. Although we do think he's a better offensive lineman, but also he's a pretty darn good defensive lineman. One of the few guys, like sometimes we say that guys can play on both sides of the ball. I think Liam Andrews really could play on both sides of the ball and excel. I mentioned Ume, Nigel Smith. So those are your big guys right there. T.A. Cunningham from California as well. But I feel good about the group that they have, like sort of closer to home. Like you struggle to call them fallbacks, but the guys that are rated just a little bit lower, good players. Mentioned Gilliam, David Poly, like Penn State.
Yep.
The arrow is trending upward on David Poly in terms of their interest, and I think in terms of his interest in them. DeAndre Cook in DC, a guy that we don't talk about very much. He was just up, his size checks out, things like that. So, like it's not a situation where if you go big game hunting and you don't get those guys, you don't have anybody to fall back on. I think they have a deeper pool than probably you give them credit for.
Yeah, and that's when you can get a mix of those guys too. That's with the class size from what you and Ryan have talked about, how many they want to take. That also opens the opportunity to take maybe some of your top targets, and then some of the guys that you want to take a flyer on, or some of the guys that you think are really solid. Quarterback, we have to talk about quarterback. I'm always bad about this of getting to it not first because that's what people want to know about. The quarterback board, we talked about this last week. You check out our show and some of the conversations we had on the YouTube channel previously. But how do you feel here sitting in the evaluation period about the quarterback situation, and will they land one of the guys that they think is a quality addition to the roster?
I'm fine with it right now. You would obviously like to have one of those top guys on early. Van Buren, you thought you were in a good spot for. Then you thought he was going to commit to Oregon. Now all of a sudden, Luke Moga jumps on board with Oregon, and maybe that one's thrown back up in the air. Croman-Hoke has always been the guy. Luke Croman-Hoke, the Florida State guy, Florida State commit, has always been the top guy. So you keep chipping away there. I think it's important that you don't sacrifice what you're looking for just to grab a quarterback. Like you can get a quarterback from camp. It's not ideal. They did it with Jackson Smolik last year, though. So we will see where that one goes. A lot of schools have quarterbacks in the boat. Penn State does not. I think the being two classes behind Aller, you have the opportunity to bring in another big time guy in 2024, maybe a little bit more in 2025, but in 2024, you still have enough space in between there that you can continue to sell it. Interesting visit on Friday. Check out the site for that, because that might throw a wrench into everything. So I think there's a lot of dominoes that would have to fall for Penn State to be in an ideal quarterback situation. And even we talked about Van Buren in the past. Like, he's a really, really good quarterback, but he also has some shortcomings in terms of his size. So, like, I don't think there's going to be a perfect fit at this point. I don't think there's anybody in the region that really jumps out to you as a bona fide guy that you love. I know Ryan Puglisi is committed to Georgia, but Penn State didn't offer him. Like, Mike Yurcich has a mold. He has standards for what he's looking for, and top 150 or top 100 kid didn't really fit that mold, so he didn't go in that direction. I kind of credit him for that, because you want to do that. Grunkelmeyer, who is from Ohio, Yurcich saw him throw last week, offered him, so it's an interesting dynamic as well. So I think it's one of those things where you've got to have some patience. I don't think it's a situation where you're running and panicking. Now, I expected Van Buren off the board this weekend. He didn't come off the board this weekend. So that helps you feel a little bit better. But at the same time, it's very, very interesting. And Samaj Jones still hanging around as well, and down there in Philly.
I got a chance to do a little bit of a deeper dive on Ethan Grunkelmeyer this past weekend. I'm really impressed. I think that's a guy who could be a huge upside play, and it has a lot of, I hate using the word it factor, but there's plays like, he extends the play, but he's looking downfield. He's manipulating the defense intentionally from the pocket to do certain things to get certain coverages open. Seeing some of the advanced level things of thought process on his film. and the way he flicks the ball and it zooms out of his hand, like there's a lot to be impressed with Ethan Gruckmeyer. I know it's not, again, not a complete prospect, not a perfect fit, but in terms of the hierarchy of needs, there's a lot of things he does on film that like check off 1, 2, 3, and then you get down to some of the other things and you go, okay, we have to work on some of this. We'll be touching on him quite a bit during this evaluation period heading into the official visit season over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So stay tuned for that. Last place.
Before we get go ahead. With quarterbacks, they just offered Trevor Jackson. The Elite 11 tour is coming to State College, but it's also going everywhere else. Trevor Jackson was at the first stop and he got invited to the Elite 11. Maybe he's not on Penn State's radar before that, but, you know, Yurcich pays attention to that stuff. Penn State pays attention to the Elite 11 stuff because they trust the guys that are doing the evaluations. So I'm not convinced that Penn State's done offering quarterbacks either. Like this could be a situation where you could see a guy pop up in the, you know, at a different regional or something like that and really impress the staff. And Yurcich still has some time to go see him throw. So I think once you get through the spring evaluation period, you have a better idea of where these guys kind of stack up. But I don't think they're done offering guys in 2024. And I don't think it's necessarily a panic offer, but I think that it's an opportunity to further evaluate and get out there. Trevor Jackson looks like a pretty good player. Like he was certainly not on my radar before this Elite 11 camp that he went to. I believe that was either in late March, early April. But I think that this is how they work it with when you don't have a guy that's a no-brainer right in your backyard. You can make it work other ways, and that's the way that they're taking this this approach. And as I said, Elite 11's coming to Penn State in May, so we'll see if they can get. I mean, you can. I don't want to say use that as a chip, but you can attract quarterbacks to your general area. I know this is at State College High, but you have the opportunity to visit Penn State while you're here, so you can say, "Hey, you can come up and compete in this camp. We want to see you not necessarily throw there in person, but we want to see you on campus. We want to take you around, get to know you, all that kind of stuff." So it's sort of a chip for Penn State there to have that back in town. I think is a very big thing, especially for this position.
I always get ahead of myself, and you've mentioned that a couple times. It's a really great point that Penn State can slow play a little bit. If they don't have a guy that they absolutely want, don't just take a guy, as you said. You know, late bloomers are a real thing. Not everyone develops at the same rate. So that's why rankings always update and change and evolve, because these guys are updating, changing, and evolving. And the more some guy does develop late, the more it changes the kind of the landscape that you knew the whole time. So last position group I want to get to here, and I apologize, we're running a little longer, but this is a really great conversation. I don't feel as great about receiver as I do about some of the other positions we've talked about, given the names, giving some of the things I've seen in terms of the player and the fit. Not a panic guy, obviously, but is this as deep of a board as we've seen before, or is this still kind of one of the situations where they're still trying to work through a lot of stuff with Higgins being new?
You really look at Chance Robinson and say you would love to get him here to campus for an official visit before he committed. Obviously came off the board in Miami. They're still going to chip away, but it's recruitments like that where you are trying to hold off as long as you can to get these guys on campus, and then one of those falls, and it's a pretty big chip. They felt pretty good about Chance Robinson, the relationship that they've had. He's been on campus before. It came up, I think, for the whiteout last year. So that's a recruitment where it was tough. Now, on the flip side, you get Nick Marsh back on campus in June, or you got him back on campus last month, and that went better than you could have hoped for. You know, you set up an official visit. There's a guy that's been a top target for a long, long time. So that's kind of the flip side to that recruitment. But yeah, it's kind of like defensive line. You'd like to have a guy on board right now. You've got a couple of options maybe closer to home. Josiah Brown was on campus, and he's going to be back for an official. The kid from Camden, who I just Jalen Hornsby, who was slipping my mind there for a second. He seems like a realistic option as well, but sort of like defensive tackle, that's going to be a big group. That's going to be a group of 3 or 4 receivers in this class. You're going to have a group of 4 defensive tackles in this class. Like that, those are going to be big groups. So you would think that a guy would have jumped on board by now, but be interesting to see how Higgins handles this room. You know, again, it is May 1st, so it's not a situation where you need to sign them right now.
Yep.
But you would like to see more of those official visits set up with guys that you think are of this caliber. And that's another important thing is I think they could have guys right now. Like I think you could have them at a couple different positions right now. Guys that have that little check mark beside their name as offers. But, you know, you want to make sure that you've got the evaluation down. You want to make sure that these guys are fast enough strong enough and have the intangibles that you're looking for to play this position, and you're not just jumping to grab guys just to grab guys.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and they need to solve certain acute problems on the roster and some things James Franklin has talked about several times this spring. And if that's just not a spring issue, a 2023 season issue, that is a chronic issue where they need to get specific guys into the program. So I think that's a really important position for Penn State in this cycle. Obviously, everyone, I think, agrees with that part. Let's move on. We're going to have a quick conversation, then we'll get to Garrett Sexton's interview, where we're talking about him and Egan Boyer. So last week I wrote about these two tackle prospects over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. If you want to check that article out, I'll throw that in the link of this video in a little bit after the show. But one of the things that I've been looking at is I know position versatility is a great thing to sell for offensive linemen at Penn State, but nothing's better than having length and size. So I went back through the history of James Franklin at Penn State, and I did my best I'm not a historian here. I don't remember all these things specifically, but I looked at arm length and general height of like pure tackle prospects. Penn State has 2 in the class of 2024. Here are the times over the last 10 years where Penn State has had 2 guys that have the length and size to be a tackle. 2015, Sterling Jenkins, Paris Palmer. 2018, possibly the best combination that ever was with Rasheed Walker and Nana Asidu. And then 2020 with Penn State's star tackle, Olu Fashanu, and Jimmy Christ, who just recently transferred to Virginia. So this is, to me, this is an unprecedented class of guys that have talent. They have the length and size, but also the athleticism, I think, to both be reasonably projectable guys that hit, that are talented. So, Fitz, is there anything you want to clean up here on this particular conversation through the history part, or do you want to just jump right into evaluating the 2 guys that they have on the roster this year?
Not much. I think that there is a type, and Phil Troutwine doesn't seem to have caved to that this cycle. Obviously, you always want traditional like prototype tackles, 34-inch arms plus, whatever. You can't always get that, but you do what you can with what you have. And I think this was the most diverse board of actual tackles out there. Like even some of your interior guys, you mentioned Cooper Cousins, have tackle size. So they've upped what they're looking for in terms of size, in terms of length, in terms of frame and things like that. So I think that they've done a good job finding what they want and, pressing. Like Garrett Sexton's offer list is good. Got better with that Wisconsin offer, obviously, but like it's not a no-brainer where you're looking to take, this is not a national guy. We have him ranked really highly on 3, but this is not a national guy by any stretch. So they've done a nice job emphasizing what they're looking for: a body type, a frame, all this kind of stuff, feet, footwork, and things like that. Boyer is a really interesting prospect where he is like, there haven't been many built like him that have come through here. So Penn State has found a type. Phil Troutwine has gone with that and really hit the gas. And it's interesting to see because they've still got some guys out there. Kevin Haywood's still out there. Packy Finau's still out there. You've got guys that may fit this mold as well. And I don't want to say there's a surplus of them because there never is of guys that can move like that at that size. But like it was a pretty good recruiting job by Phil Troutwine this cycle.
Are you as high on Sexton as I am? Because I understand this is a very raw prospect.
Yes.
But he and I spoke, and you're going to hear a little bit about that in terms of his intelligence and understanding his role on the offense, a former quarterback that knows the whole offense. So from a positional intelligence standpoint, I think is off the charts. You can see even though he's raw, he knows what he's doing. Secondarily, I don't know that I've seen a guy that has the movement skills that he does with the length and the obvious violence in his game. Like I don't see a whole lot of flaws other than he needs to learn the position in his film. So are you as high on him? Because I think he could be in that category of Olu Fashanu in terms of upside in his recruitment. I understand he's very raw. He played very light last year, but I don't see anything that normally I go, okay, I don't like that, or I don't think that can be fixed. There's none of that for me. And for an offensive tackle, that is rare, and they got, I think, 2 of them that are in that mold. So Do you see it the same way, or what am I missing if you don't?
No, I'm high on him. I'm not going to throw around the Olu comparison because I know what that brings with it. I was very high on Olu as well when he was in high school, but it sometimes you find guys where a really really good compliment is kid doesn't know what he's doing, and
Yeah.
that's what I see in Sexton because you see so many of the good things, the feet, the activity. Like he is really really active as an offensive lineman, and he's going to be when he gets to 300 pounds, is going to be that same guy. I don't know, but he's got a lot of boxes there. And then you have to teach him how to block, and he seems to have the capacity. And I actually just put up a deep dive on Garrett Sexton here, and one of the things I took away was if you can commit to going from a 185-pound quarterback to a 240-pound offensive tackle in a year, learn to play the position, actually play the position, excel at the position. That shows me that you've got the mindset and the determination needed to get where he needs to be, not necessarily as like a willing blocker, because I don't think that that's what comes to play here, but have the ability to get where he needs to go, work where he needs to go, and work himself into it. So I think that's the most encouraging thing. Sometimes it just doesn't click with offensive linemen. I think he's fine. The quarterback background is great. Like it's fantastic. But I mean, how much does he know as a sophomore quarterback in Wisconsin playing high school football? Like I think that statement or that part of it is probably going to be overstated. We make the Lane Johnson jokes and comparisons and things like that. So that's probably a little bit overstated, but you just love what you see from his approach. You love what you see from his building blocks, I would say.
Yeah.
Not even close to being a complete player yet, but you can see the elements of being a really, really good offensive tackle in Garrett Sexton.
Yeah. And we actually talk a little bit about that here in our conversation. Again, we'll have the full interview up this afternoon, bluewhiteillustrated.com. This is just about a 6-minute sneak peek at what we talked about. And we do start with that quarterback transition from his sophomore season to his junior year, because it was much closer to camp than I think we realized when he made this move. And he talks about it here. We're speaking with Garrett Sexton. He is one of the latest commitments to the class of 2024 for Penn State football, offensive tackle, but not always. And I'm interested. I know most Penn State fans that follow Penn State recruiting already know that you played quarterback before and you just transitioned to the offensive line. But I want to ask you a couple more questions about that. When did you know? Because I know that the conversation is like about transitioning from quarterback to offensive line, but when was it really clear, like, okay, this is what I really should do?
Yeah. So honestly, it wasn't until maybe even after this time last year where the thought had even come up, because I weighed about 185 after basketball season, which was March of 2022. So I was like, all right, I need to put on some weight. Got in the weight room, started eating good. I got up to around 225 pounds in May. So in a couple months, I put on some good weight. And then it had brought up, like, coach had brought up tight end, tackle. We needed another tackle really bad. And, the decision really wasn't finalized until right before camp in summer. I was still practicing quarterback. I had run some routes. I had still been practicing tackle. So the decision really wasn't final until like a week before our summer camp. But, once it was decided that's what I was playing, I just took it and ran with it. And I love it. And I think tackle's way better than quarterback. So
really, I was just about to ask. It's hard to give up a glamour position for some people, but you're saying it was easy for you to make the transition.
Yeah, well, for me, the thing I like about tackle is like there's something you got like a major job every play. Like at quarterback, sometimes you're gonna be handed the ball off, or obviously you'll be throwing and getting all the glory. But I like tackle. I like putting guys in the dirt. So.
I noticed that. We'll get to your highlights in just a minute. I noticed that you seem to really relish that part. Did playing quarterback for so long through the process, did that help you see the field differently? I know you don't know what it's like to just play offensive line, but it seems like that helped you out understand your assignment.
As far as mentally, yeah. I mean, I think I'm probably the only guy on the field. I knew what every single player on the field was doing every single play, because at quarterback, I had to know every single route, what the running back was doing every play, and obviously quarterback. And now I know what every single lineman's doing every play. So I just think it's great. I know everything going on the field, every single play. And anyone ever has a question can come ask me.
That, by the way, checking out your highlight film here, but checking out some of your full games, that comes through as well. You seem to understand your assignment. You understand the point of your assignment as well. And, as our film guy, I love seeing that, of kind of the big picture of, like, here, okay, I got to get to the second level. I got to get to that linebacker. I know that's my job on this play. When it comes to your position, how much have you been working with your position coach on stuff like that? And what does your offense do that you think can help your transition to Penn State?
Yeah, our position coach is great. His name is Brad Linares. He helped me a lot. He was one of the first people that saw, like, oh, this guy could be a really good offensive lineman. But I just worked with him every day. I felt like we were getting better every practice, and he helped me a lot. And then as far as, like what we do in our offense, I feel like I'm really able to get into space a lot and run and use my athleticism. So I think that's an advantage of our offense. We run a lot of outside zone and stuff. We're a pin and pull, so it gets me into a lot of open space where I can get guys out in the field.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a part and something that I've been watching Penn State's offensive line develop in some of those schemes for a while. So that ability, especially on the backside, to get to some of those blocks, not a lot of guys have that ability. So it seems like from a schematic point, it's a really good fit between you and what Penn State wants to do. But I got to ask this question now. I have to ask this. 6'6", how much do you weigh right now?
Around 250, maybe a little bit more.
How the hell are you so fast?
I don't know. I work on my speed, work on agility, footwork, and all that stuff.
I apologize if that's an embarrassing question or if that's a little bit off the cuff, but it is impressive how fast you are on the football field for an offensive lineman. And I think a big part of why On3 has you where we do in our rankings as well. So, in terms of kind of like, how did you grow? Like, did you just shoot up recently, or have you been this big for a while now, being as tall and as long, as athletic as you are?
I think it's like a freshman. I was like going into my the summer between 8th grade and freshman year. 8th grade year got done. That was like COVID. I was like 6 feet tall in June, and then by September I was 6'4". So I got pretty tall pretty quick there, and then I just kind of put on the next 2 to 3 inches over gradually until now. But I think one of the things that I take advantage of is, if I'm not going to be as heavy, because like last season I was playing around 220, so 220, 225 during season. So I think if I wasn't going to be the heaviest guy, I better be the fastest, have the best footwork. So.
Do you have a 40 time you'd be willing to share that you've done recently, or is it have you done?
I have not. I don't have a 40 time, but I've never ran one in time.
So there's a lot of things I'm sure that you're working on. Somebody who is very, very new to the position, but is there something specifically that you said, okay, I need to be better at this, and that'll help my offense a lot next year, where maybe you focus on one thing while all of your skills are kind of developing at the same time, and you're soaking up all that information on the offensive line? What would be one thing you would point out?
Probably my pass set right now. I think that's the one thing that's lacking. I think that takes a little bit longer to, pick up. I think some of the other stuff is just going to be natural size and ability. I want to work on like my hand placement and my footwork too, but for sure the pass set, I think that's the number one thing I need to focus on going into next season.
Thanks again to Garrett for joining us this weekend. You'll see the full interview coming up in just a little bit. Fitz, any last thoughts to get us out of here?
I stayed on because you were wearing the same shirt, and that's all I had to comment on. Good stuff from Garrett. I think he understands the process, and I think, again, I can't understate how important that is for a guy like him to understand that he's going to come in as a freshman, and it's going to be tough because he's going to be smaller. And don't get hung up on the weight right now, because he's going to be bigger by the time that he gets on the campus. But it's going to be a process to get there. It's going to be a process when he gets here, and that's going to be an interesting it's going to be an interesting watch to see how he figures it out.
Yeah, I tend to get overexcited, and maybe Olu Fashanu is a high bar to set. But like I said, I like so many things he does on film. I think he has not unlimited potential, and there are obviously some things he needs to work on. But the skill level and all of those things you just mentioned, just meeting him for that brief period of time and seeing some of those context clues on film, he seems like, as you said, he understands the process. He's got the work ethic and the determination to get there. So I'm excited to see how he progresses throughout the next couple years of his career. That'll do it today for the BWI live show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Sean Fitz killing it. As always, check out bluewhiteillustrated.com. Sign up now, like this video, do all the things that we do. We want you to be a part of it. So subscribe, like, rate, review, and high five if you want as well. We'll be back on Wednesday with more Penn State football talk. We'll talk to you then.